Okay, as promised, with me is David Howman, who writes for Blogging the Boys, and you're also co-host of the Writers Block podcast, which covers the Cowboys. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. You can hear me every Wednesday morning talking about the Cowboys.
So, what's the prevailing feeling among Cowboys fans and people who cover the Dallas Cowboys? Is this a good move for the team? Is it you happy to see Mike McCarthy move on, or is there some sadness?
Um, I think it really depends on who you ask. Myself personally, I was banging the drum all year to bring back Mike McCarthy. I was very much a believer in him. The prevailing sentiment among the fan base is kind of relief. Um, there's been this rocky relationship with McCarthy and the fans pretty much since he got to Dallas, and a lot of fans wanted him fired after both losses to the 49ers in the playoffs.
You need someone, San Francisco, to get to the quarterback here.
Prescott takes off running the football. Whoa, I don't think this is going to work out.
It will. They'll be able to clock this. They were planning for it. It's down. Oh, my gosh.
The official gets in the way. The game's over.
A lot of fans really wanted him fired after the loss to the Packers in the playoffs last year. And then this narrative all year long with McCarthy coaching into the final year of his contract, which is so rare in the NFL. And then, of course, the season doesn't go as it was planned. Dak Prescott gets hurt. Micah Parsons missed time. And that you finish with a losing season, and a lot of fans wanted him gone. Interestingly, the players very much wanted him to stay.
It is devastating. Coach Mike's a great father, coach, one of the most winningest coaches. And, he's always been good to us as a unit, us to coaches, players. So, losing a great coach like Mike hurts.
They kind of got hot towards the end of the year. They won, 4 games in 5 weeks. Should have been 5 in a row. They lost to the Bengals because one of their punt returners couldn't handle a muffed punt where they blocked the Bengals in the final 2 minutes. The players did not quit on this guy. Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb all publicly said, we want Mike McCarthy back. We will advocate for him to come back. And as more details have come out since the two parted ways on Monday, it sounds like this was more so Mike McCarthy's decision, and he felt like Jerry Jones wasn't willing to commit to him on the level that he was wanting to see for his next contract, and decided, you know what? Chicago wants me to interview. New Orleans wants me to interview. I'll go to Chicago, get some deep dish, and then head on my way down to New Orleans to see what the Saints are all about. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm out.
Now, let me ask you about McCarthy's work with Dak Prescott, because obviously the Chicago Bears are looking for a coach to develop their first-round pick. What can you tell us about Coach McCarthy's relationship with Dak and how he helped him progress?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting the way that things progressed while he was in Dallas, because when he first showed up, he kept Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator, who's now the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. There was a lot of controversy. There's differing reports on whether that was truly McCarthy's decision, whether that was, he was handcuffed to Moore by Jerry Jones. But either way, Kellen Moore was the play caller for McCarthy's first 3 years in Dallas. So as far as the relationship with Dak Prescott, a lot of that really focused on more personal things. Obviously that first year with McCarthy, Dak Prescott suffers a season-ending injury in week 5. A big part of their relationship was really just McCarthy getting to know Prescott a little bit better, building their relationship, and that served as a solid foundation moving forward. And then the last 2 years he's been calling plays. And as that relates to, from the football perspective, how to project that to what he would do with Caleb Williams, Mike McCarthy has long had a reputation of being a quarterback-friendly coach. Going back to, he coached Joe Montana back with the Chiefs, which, everybody remembers. Joe Montana, Chiefs legend, took over for the last part of Brett Favre's career in Green Bay, and then, Aaron Rodgers very much came up under Mike McCarthy. A lot of his system is really based on simplifying the offense and speeding things up for the quarterback, getting the ball out quickly. One of the biggest changes for the Cowboys offense that he made was essentially in our drop back passing game. You've got your first read. If it's there, hit it. If it's not, find your second read. And at that point, if your first 2 reads aren't there, get out of the pocket, go into your scramble drill, And in the words of Thomas Brown, the interim head coach for the Bears, go be Superman. That worked really well for Dak Prescott. He was a runner-up for MVP in 2023, his first year with McCarthy calling plays. In having watched several games of Caleb Williams, both at USC and then now with the Bears, I definitely see a lot of ways that this would be a good fit for Caleb, just in terms of, simplifying things for him after the snap, speeding up his process, so that he can go look for DJ Moore, he can look for Rome Odunze, and if it's not there, then he gets to do the thing that really separates him from all the other rookies in this class: get out of the pocket, do that scramble drill. And Mike McCarthy, both with the Packers and the Cowboys, puts a real emphasis on practicing the scramble drill in practices in the offseason, so that when the quarterback does get out of the pocket, receivers know where to go. The quarterback knows where his guys are going to be, so that they're going to be able to get some really good plays when the quarterback does improvise.
One of the complaints that I've heard about Mike McCarthy's offense is that it's not innovative, that it is kind of stuck in the decades ago types offenses that he ran with the Packers.
I think it's probably a bit overplayed at this point, but it's not entirely without merit. McCarthy is, for as much as he presents himself as he's very proud of his Pittsburgh roots. He tries to present himself as this guy that's we're going to be physical, we're going to punch guys in the mouth. He also is very deferential to his players. So going back to when he was an offensive coordinator for the Saints, those offenses relative to the rest of the league, they ran a lot of motion, they ran a lot of play action. They did a lot of things that at that time, this is early 2000s, was fairly innovative, was fairly creative for the rest of the league's offensive trends. When he gets to Green Bay, and this was talked about, very early in his Packers tenure, Aaron Rodgers was not a fan of motion. He was not a fan of play action. He didn't like turning his back to the defense. So McCarthy more or less took that out. In Dallas, there's been certain concepts from the Kellen Moore offense that he kept in place because it was something Dak Prescott really liked. And so those have both kind of impacted his ability to be to really flex his Ben Johnson muscles, if you will, and show himself as a really creative play caller. But there's definitely been times where we've seen, especially in this past season, once Cooper Rush became the starter, and they kind of got into this mode of we're technically still alive in the playoff hunt, but also we're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. There were some concepts that we got to see thrown out there of okay, he's kind of reaching into his bag now, but for the most part, he does really put an emphasis on doing what his quarterback is comfortable with, doing what his receivers are comfortable with. Sometimes that results in repetitive play calls. Sometimes that results in things that maybe not be as exciting. He's not going to call any plays where Caleb Williams pretends to stumble as the fake handoff and then throws a wide open touchdown to Cole Kmet. But for the most part, I mean, he keeps things simple so that his quarterback every single play is going to know where he's going with the ball. There's not going to really be a whole lot of situations where he's unsure of what he's supposed to do or is having to take too much time standing back there in the pocket. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. But his track record, for offensive results and also his record as a head coach speaks for itself. And I don't think he's necessarily keen on completely overhauling that part of the operation.
Caleb was on a podcast, the St. Brown podcast, and mentioned when asked about what he's looking for in a head coach, and one of the first things he said was a leader of men. Could you apply that title or that characteristic to Mike McCarthy?
Mike McCarthy's tenure in Dallas, it got off to a really tricky start. He comes in and, he in the introductory press conference, Jerry Jones is talking about, in the interview he said, he's watched every single snap of every single game. He knows this roster through and through already. He studied us so much. And then McCarthy made kind of a joke, but it was very awkward where he's like,
I told Jerry I watched every play of the 2019 season, but I wanted the job. So I haven't watched every play of the season, but it was just, I mean, you do what you got to do, right?
It started off kind of awkward, and then, of course, once he builds his coaching staff, part of it was, like I said, keeping Kellen Moore, that people weren't really sure how's this going to work out, this fit. And then, of course, a month later, COVID hit, and the whole offseason program was completely changed from anything that McCarthy's done before. And so that first year was very rocky between McCarthy and the rest of the roster. There were a lot of these guys that he didn't even meet in person until they started training camp, which is very different from the usual setting. But then after that, once he kind of got on a familiar basis with his players, 3 straight 12-win seasons. Obviously, this year didn't go the way that they expected it to, but injuries played a large part of that. And, players were still fighting for him even after they were eliminated from the playoff contention. They were publicly saying, like, we want him back. There were several different points throughout his tenure, through the good and the bad seasons, where when the Cowboys would lose, they had a tendency to, in the next game, whoever it was that they were playing against, more often than not, they won, and they won in, big fashion, like blowing guys out. And a lot of that was attributed to the mentality that Mike McCarthy had coming in. He really put an emphasis on, we're going to win our home games, we're going to win our division games, and when we do lose, we're going to come out, we're going to play angry, and we're going to play like the team we know we can be and prove to everyone that the loss the week before, that's not the real us. So, right now there's a lot of, everybody wants a leader of men because everyone's seen Dan Campbell and how successful he's been in Detroit. I'm not going to sit here and say Mike McCarthy is similar to Dan Campbell. They're definitely different people. He's got a more understated approach, but I think in general, though, Mike McCarthy, he's done a very good job of connecting with his players, bringing in good coaches like Dan Quinn, like Mike Zimmer, and empowering them to put the players in the best position to succeed. And just from the sheer experience as well, having obviously been in Green Bay, knowing the NFC North, knowing the Bears, I think he has more wins against the Bears in his career than any other team he's faced. So I think from a leadership, from a respect standpoint, in theory, he should be able to get a lot of buy-in from players.
And if this works out for Mike McCarthy, he's the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. What can Bears fans expect from the defensive side of the ball, and how McCarthy coaches that?
Yeah, well, I think it would be kind of fun if he brings in Mike Zimmer, and then maybe he can bring Jim Caldwell and like all the Infinity Stones of the NFC North. But Mike McCarthy is very much an offensive guy. He doesn't really get too terribly involved with the X's and O's of the defense, but what he's always looked for, he talks a lot about complementary football. He's going to want a defense that can play very fast and play very aggressive. So when he first came to Dallas, he hired Mike Nolan to be his defensive coordinator. He was out after a year. Things did not go very well, but what they were trying to do with that defense was what they ultimately did with Dan Quinn when he came in a year later, which was have a defense that from the looks, from the fronts that they give you pre-snap, you have no idea what you're getting. They would bluff a lot of blitzers. They would drop guys into coverage that you're not expecting. They ran a lot of stunts and twists on the defensive line to confuse offensive linemen, and really just always playing with an attacking mindset. Dan Quinn comes in and he does exactly that. It was very much the stuff that he succeeded with as the Seahawks defensive coordinator under Pete Carroll. And having Micah Parsons also helped a lot when you have a guy like that. But they were pretty much always trying to rush the passer, always playing either like cover 3 or press cover 3, or they were playing press man coverage, trying to be aggressive and physical with opposing receivers. And Mike Zimmer is a little bit of a different approach in terms of the X's and O's, but still the same mentality of attacking. Mike McCarthy's ideal defense is one that as long as his offense goes down the field and they can score, and as long as they're always nursing a lead, his defense, basically, they just get to pin their ears back, go after the quarterback. And he had a lot of blowout wins in Dallas as their head coach, similarly in Green Bay, largely because he got that complementary football of our offense is scoring points, the defense is sacking the quarterback left and right. He doesn't really get too caught up in the specific X's and O's, but he's more so just, find me a defensive coordinator who philosophically matches up with me on that. And however they make their defense aggressive, I don't really care that part, but I want someone who matches my style.
David, you've provided a really great portrait of Mike McCarthy. Is there anything else you want to share with Chicago Bears fans regarding McCarthy that we should know if indeed, he becomes the next Bears head coach?
I think what I think most about McCarthy and what I'll miss from covering the Cowboys is, by all accounts, he's a really incredible, genuine person. He's somebody who cares a lot about his players, goes out of his way to express that to them. He also is very he's very patient, and he's very honest with members of the media. I've heard countless stories from people who are on the ground in Dallas, who talk to him every single day in the locker room and press conferences, and he would meet you and he would remember your name the next time. He would strike up conversations with you in the hallway, and if people ask questions that might be dumb questions, he's never once belittled people. He's never once made fun of people. He builds relationships, and he'll joke around with you. He also built a reputation for being very cautious with players that were working through an injury. He'd never rushed people back from injuries. If there was ever a situation where, there's several times they had key players like Micah Parsons, like CeeDee Lamb, who you really want to get those guys back, obviously. And it's kind of a toss-up of should they play, should they wait another week. He more often than not would lean towards let's wait another week. The last thing that he wants to do is put someone's long-term health at risk just for the sake of getting a short-term win. I think, obviously there's going to be a lot of conversation about his time in Dallas, why it ended the way it did, why his time in Green Bay ended the way it did. Is he the guy to turn the Bears around when you're interviewing guys like Ben Johnson, who I'm sure the fan base, probably everybody universally wants him. But just as a person, I think Mike McCarthy will do wonders for the culture, wonders for the people that are covering the team. I think, he's won a lot, with two different teams now and had a lot of really successful players, but he's also, in my mind, a grade A human being.
Fantastic stuff, David. You write for Blogging the Boys. Your podcast is called The Writer's Block, and that's on the Cowboys, right? Why the title, The Writer's Block?
Well, it was started originally by a bunch of us writers at Blogging the Boys who came up with the idea that, hey, sometimes we can't really come up with something to write, but we can all hop on a call and talk football for an hour. And so when we've got writer's block, let's do this. And that's kind of where it came from.
Very, very clever. Really appreciate you hanging out with us for a few minutes and giving us this perspective on Mike McCarthy. We'll see you down the road, okay?
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.